there. You are now listening to Resilience with Dhruti Shah, a podcast that brings you stories of grit and growth from leaders and dreamers across the globe. Stay tuned for today's guest.
Hello and welcome. This is Dhruti Shah on your Resilience podcast, bringing you yet another interesting story of resilience. Today, I'm joined by Anji Hallewell, an award-winning career coach who helps professionals thrive in an era of AI disruption and constant change. With 20 years of experience in talent development and a background as a recruiter and HR business partner in the media industry, Anji has worked with thousands of professionals across 19 countries to maximize their potential. Anji's mission is clear: to future-proof careers by aligning your zone of genius with meaningful, purpose-led work, ensuring the best is yet to come. Let's hear more from Anji herself. Hey Anji, welcome to Resilience with Dhruti Shah. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you.
So let's just start with your story, Anji. You help people navigate career pivots, but you are also in the middle of your own pivot right now. What is driving this transition?
How ironic, right?
Right? Yes.
Well, aren't we always pivoting and evolving? Otherwise, we're just staying in the same place. But you only have to look over the last 4 to 5 years. We saw what was happening just after the pandemic with the economy really affecting what workplaces look like. So there was a lot of displacement of people on the back of that. But that displacement hasn't stopped. It's continued. And it's not economically driven right now. It's actually more about the AI disruption. Companies are not necessarily always replacing people. People are still being replaced through automation, some roles. So there's this rate that is happening of acceleration with AI and technology disruption in the workplace. And I generally have a concern that people just don't know what's coming. They're not prepared for it. It's happening so quickly. And I've seen firsthand, I've seen what a product of having the rug pulled out from underneath you really like, and how disruptive that is to your morale, your earnings, your happiness, your fulfillment, your whole identity. And I feel very strongly that I just don't want people to be in that situation. And I guess I'm pivoting into not just about career clarity of helping people get clear, get noticed, get hired, but also be ready. Yeah,
absolutely. Be future ready in that sense, right? As you were talking about it, right? When we think about displacement, when we think about disruption, I think it is a way of taking new shapes and forms. It's just always there, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I guess it happens at different speeds, perhaps. But it's all there, right? It's just kind of part of life. Maybe we just notice it more at some points than others.
Yeah. Before we take a deep dive, Anji, paint us a picture. What does a typical client look like when they first come to you? Like, what is that moment of realization that makes someone say that I need to pivot? And you kind of alluded to that as you were talking about your own transition journey.
Yeah. So I guess it was me 12 years ago. That's what the typical client looks like when they come to me. And the best analogy that I can really give this is what I coin as, you can't look this up, it's not a psychology term, although it sounds like it. It's just something that I've coined, which is the princess and the pea syndrome. And we all know the story of the Princess of the Pea. I'm sure that you read this as a child, maybe you even read it to your children or have done. And of course, how does the story go? Well, the princess feels this niggle. She can't sleep. There's just this niggle very quietly in the background. And I think it's similar when we're in our careers, knowing that there is something that needs to change, but we just don't know what it is. So there's this kind of niggle that we feel. And of course, the story goes that you're layering on different mattresses to try and get rid of this niggling feeling. Mattress one is that you brush it off. Oh, it's just a phase. I'm just being silly. Mattress two is that we might start to distract ourselves with, Netflix and not and zoning out, or doom scrolling on social media, trying to switch off from this niggle that we're starting to notice and to realize because we don't know what to do about it or what it is. The third mattress is that we take a deeper dive into maybe self-improvement or how to improve your career. And you can get lost in courses and upgrading and upskilling and Google searches and now AI chats. And more often than not, by the time people come to me, they've done all of these things and they're more confused than where they were when they started. So adding on more mattresses isn't the answer. So I guess, what is the tipping point for people when they typically come to me? Well, they recognize that they're just adding on all these different mattresses and they need to deal with the niggle. They've got to deal with the P.
Yeah, I love that, the example that you shared. I think that's a great analogy. And it's just about sensing that something is not right. And are we listening and acknowledging to the signals that our body is sending? And I think there is sometimes a physiological response to this as well. I don't know if your clients have experienced something like that, but something just doesn't sit right, and your body is in turmoil as it thinks about it. So, and there's also something vulnerable about coming to you as a client and saying that I need to change. And a lot of times, a lot of us say that maybe I should just stick with what's working. How do you kind of unlayer the mattresses that have been piled up over a period of time? Sometimes years, right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's I always ask people this question when they come to me, like, how long have you been thinking about this? How long have you been aware of this? Because I know from my own experience, it took me 7 years. I was in this like limbo, little bit of a niggle going on, a little bit lost, not really knowing what to do about it. I just had no idea of what else existed outside of what I knew, right? So I always ask this question, and it's not uncommon that people are like 7 years, 8 years, 10 years of having this kind of sense that they're just not on the right track. But it feels like such a shift to change, almost impossible in some ways to some people, that it can be really challenging. And of course, that inner critic, it will flare up. If your inner critic's ever going to flare up, it's going to be at a time where you're starting to think bigger and to think about being, a bit of activating some change in your life. So that inner critic's gonna really be flaring up at that stage. And I don't think it's so much like maybe I should stick with what's working, because let's face it, what they're doing right now actually isn't working for them. Otherwise they wouldn't have this feeling, right? I think it's more about sticking with the status quo. It's better the devil you know. And that saying can, even just thinking that can just really, really just keep us stuck in the very space that we want to get out of. So I think the real key thing here, that really everything has to center around, no matter what we want to do, no matter how big we want to dream, no matter what our ambition is, if we aspire to evolve, if we aspire to do bigger and better things out there in the world, albeit in their career, which of course is the bit that I focus on, we've got to really know what our mission is and what our genius is, what our unique potential is. Because the moment that we really start to understand who we are and what it is that we can really bring, because we have our own potential, our own genius that we can actually bring to this world, then it just makes it so much easier to then start to listen to that. So I think really step one is really starting to regulate that inner critic so that you can be in a bit more of a grounded headspace, so that you can, something that you mentioned earlier, Druti, so you can listen to this little whisper of how you're being guided and what it is that you really want from that kind of inner voice, that authentic inner voice, because it's very easy in this world really stop and listen and be in a grounded headspace to do that. Then we always feel like we're just going off in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think the noise is everywhere, isn't it? There is the internal dialogue, there is the external noise, and as you said, the doom scroll. I mean, it's just we're dealing with so much right now in that sense. So, have there been situations, or maybe if you can share an example, if possible, where somebody started pivoting, we're in the right direction, and then the inner critic kind of takes over and they make a U-turn? Has anything like that ever surfaced in your journey as a career coach?
Yeah, we're dealing with human behavior. And as much as we would love to think that we can, have a couple of conversations and we discover these good things and we
Yeah.
put sights on it and then easy peasy, off we go. But there
Mm.
is a side of us in our comfort zone that will really feel challenged. There's one thing to think something and to decide to do something. And it's very different to then take action on that. And that's where the challenges come in. And this is why, there has to be a certain amount of embedding that needs to happen. Because there's actually, do you know what's really happening here, Druti, is that there's a little bit of an identity shift that has to happen. Think about it. If you ever change anything significantly in your life, there's always a little bit of a transition, an identity change and shift that has to happen with that. Maybe when you become a parent, maybe when you get married, and of course when you are switching careers, it's no different. It's the same principles underneath it. And I think what's really important is that we just keep anchoring and focusing on, well, what is authentic to you? What is your zone of genius? And if we're aligning things congruently in accordance to that, it will always be true for you. Yeah. The
Yeah.
rest of it is really just about courage. The rest of it is just a little bit of a bumpy ride that goes along the way. But we just need to keep bringing it back when people have self-doubt, because it's going to happen. It's almost like, let's just have a given. Let's just say it's a
Yeah.
given. There's going to be
Yeah.
turbulence on the journey, yeah?
Hmm.
But these are opportunities to recognize how you get in your own way. These are opportunities for you to recognize where the growth areas are. These are opportunities for you to just take action, despite feeling a little bit scared, a little bit
Hmm.
fearful, and maybe even a little bit anxious, and do it anyway, because then you can activate the courage that we all have. And then, of course, you can achieve ultimately what it is that you're going for. So, yeah, all at some point of the journey, there might be, I call it a wobble. At
Yeah.
the journey, there's probably going to be a wobble, but it's
Mhm.
okay because that is just telling us that you're bumping up against your comfort zone and it's a sign of
Yeah.
growth. So I love that
Yeah.
when it happens. They don't
That
like
is so true. That is so true because it's like, um, when you're working out and you pick up a dumbbell, which is way beyond what you're used to, it's going to
yeah.
feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You might even think,
Yeah.
why am I, maybe I'll just drop it down, a couple of kgs. You start to
Hmm.
compromise with yourself, right? And
Yeah.
that's really telling of how you speak to yourself, how you actually think and what you believe is possible. So, how we
Mhm.
show up in one place is how we show up in every scenario. It's the same behavior playing out. So for me as a coach, I love those scenarios because it's such a great learning opportunity for people to evolve and to grow, which is ultimately why they're even in front of me in the first place, because they have a desire to
Yeah.
do that.
Absolutely. And then as long as it is aligned with your values and you're ready to put in the hard work and you are being bold and courageous about it, I think then there is no stopping you. So let's take a quick look at one of my favorite topics, and also a lot of people think about it otherwise, purpose, right? And I think if you look at modern literature, there's a lot of focus on that from a psychological perspective.
Yeah.
And a lot of people then they feel the pressure to find that, one true calling.
No.
So how do you approach this with your clients who feel overwhelmed by their expectation? Because not everybody has it all figured out. We figure out along the way.
Yeah.
And how do you go about that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. And you're right. The pressure
Ah.
that can come with that. When we think about, oh, I want to know what my purpose is, it can feel so big. And like you
Mm.
say, overwhelmingly big.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we've got to just release the grip a little bit of that big
Yeah.
bigness.
Yeah.
Just let
Yeah.
go of this feeling of it feels big. Because what are we
Yeah.
really saying? We're kind of saying it feels unattainable. It's almost what we're kind of
Mm.
subconsciously saying. And rather than focusing on whether it feels big, whether it feels small, and it's not about the scale. It really comes down to three things. If you understand who you uniquely are, so you understand your
Mm.
genius. So for
Mm.
me, my zone of genius is very much about helping people stay calm. People say that I have a calming influence on them. It's always been the case. So that's part of my genius.
Mhm.
It's part of what I
Yeah.
bring as a coach. So it's about calmness, optimism, and helping people, shift. into a more positive space. So that's my uniqueness, and everyone else will have their own uniqueness. So that's the genius. And then, of course, how can you translate that into what you do professionally? But not just what do I do as the job, but I like to think of it as like a professional purpose. I think we can have different layers of purpose.
Yeah.
That broader topic, maybe that's something for Jay Shetty, that bigger
Yes.
purpose topic. But I like to kind of break it down into smaller chunks, and we know that we work better. Just the human mind just works better when we're able to chunk things down into more bite-sized pieces. So you might have a different purpose in your family life. You might have a different purpose in your relationships. You might have a different purpose when you're at work, and that's the bit obviously that I focus on. So, what does that actually translate to? What is the professional purpose that is in alignment with who you really are and your uniqueness? Now, for me, it's about bringing harmony into people's careers. That's what I choose to do. It's in line. You can hear that it's in line, right, of my genius. And then I think the bit that changes, I don't think those things will change, but the bit that does change is the mission and the quest that you choose to go off on to feed that. There are many different things that I could be doing to bring harmony in people's worlds and in people's lives. In fact, when I first started out, the way that I was actually feeding that professional purpose was actually teaching professionals mindfulness so that they could, stop being so stressed out and starting to calm down and see the wood from the trees. Now that started to migrate, and then it went into finding your career clarity, which is still to an extent what I'm doing now. And then it started to evolve now in this transition that I'm going through right now, really about supporting people through the era of tech and AI disruption to the workforce. So I think your mission, it's not so much that your purpose changes or who you are fundamentally changes, but I do think your mission can change in alignment. But there's many different ways that you can play something out that will be in alignment with those things. So rather than getting so hung up about this one big thing, I think just know who you are, know what your uniqueness is, understand how that translates in terms of what your professional purpose is, and know that along the way, it might evolve a little bit in the way that you actually choose to deliver that in your mission and quest.
Yeah.
It's the way
No, that's brilliant, Angie, because even in the work that I do, right, sometimes I get this question, can my purpose change? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think what is one of the things that wouldn't change is maybe your value system, right? Your values don't change over a period of time, but your purpose can very well change, and that's all right. I think you're absolutely right. One is this whole the bigness of it. Oh my God, it's bigger than me. It's so huge. I don't know if I can ever do it. That. And the second is the sense of permanence, that we attach to it. And we feel like we're lacking focus if we have to change our purpose. Well, guess what? You are on your own journey, and that's all right. If you gotta change it, you gotta change it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I always say to people, no one's standing there with a scoreboard.
Yeah, exactly. Like only you are.
She's now doing this.
That is so true. So I think, get rid of the pressure that you put on yourself, right?
Yeah, and it is on ourselves that we put it, right?
Exactly. So true. So have you ever had a client whose sense of purpose completely shifted during your work together?
Yeah, most people come in and they have no idea what their purpose is. They have no idea who they are, and that's exactly what it boils down to. Purpose, like I say, is kind of a combination of different things: your uniqueness, the domain that you want to be attaching it to, and the way that you deliver it. So the mission and quest that you're on. And a lot of people have no idea. It feels like a very a big question for them. And it's difficult to answer it yourself. It's difficult to ask AI if you don't know what it is you're looking for, right? So yeah, I'd say there's always a big shift, and actually, what's interesting is that I've actually seen people sort of twist and pivot even beyond working with me, because it started to evolve a little bit for them as momentum takes place. So I guess really I'm kind of like the Kickstarter I'm getting them on the right path. I'm getting them on the right course, and then they can start to kind of feel their way into what's next from them beyond that, because they've got the mentality, the mindset, and they've got the tools and frameworks to be able to do that. I think there's two that I would use as like great examples. My toughest one, and it was tough because she had worked in a laboratory her entire life. She was a scientist, where, with stethoscopes and a lab coat, and she didn't know the corporate world. So if you work as a scientist, you don't know anything else. It's a very different world. And I've always worked with people in MMCs. This was new terrain to me. And we started to map out what her genius was and what that could look like in terms of her professional purpose. And we came up with some quite wacky ideas. I mean, one of them was to be maybe a content creator, of being like the crazy scientist. The other one was a comedian. So these are like vastly different, right? And she ended up on something a little bit different, which I'll share with you in a moment. But all of them came back to this focus point of, what is my uniqueness, and how can I bring that into the world? So it has that kind of connection internally first, because you've got to connect internally with you. It's got to resonate, otherwise it's never going to happen. It's just pie in the sky, and we don't want that. And what she actually ended up doing is becoming a positive psychology trainer in corporations.
Wow.
Scientist, lab coat, maybe a crazy scientist, content creator, maybe a comedian, ended up positive psychology trainer within the corporate world. And
Wow.
the other example, which I think is great, just kind of to listen to these. So I think people are generally curious, because we're curious about what it could be for us. And I think sometimes when we hear about other people's journeys, then it's kind of like, oh, well, maybe something like that is possible for me as well. Like I say, I'm a little bit of like the Kickstarter at the beginning of the process. And I worked with a lovely lady who works in procurement, and her zone of genius was all around unity, working together, and achieving great things. So there's a real camaraderie of her really being like the rally person to pull people together and get great results. And she actually became a football coach. So she went from procurement in technology as a voluntary redundancy. Then she went to be a football coach, and they won awards.
Wow.
But she took them to championships, and they won awards, they won medals for it. And now she's a management consultant, working in the gig economy. But they sound different, but they all have a common thread. They're all about doing great work by pulling people together.
Yeah. Yeah, that is fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, Angie. I think I'm having some reflections right now as I hear it, and I'm sure you've had your own moments of reflection as you're working with your clients as well. But during one of our conversations, you also mentioned that when we think about folks who are either first-time managers or who are new in the leadership journey, there often comes a tipping point in terms of stress. Yeah. We see that a lot of people, they take stress, they make it work for them, and they just propel forward. And there are some who take stress, and that stress literally drags them down.
Yeah.
How does this show up typically in the work that you do as well?
Yeah, it's so funny, because all of us want to perform at a high standard. We want that. And we want things to feel like there's some ease and flow to it as well.
Yeah.
But of course, when you're starting to get into leadership roles, now you have joined the elite club.
Yeah.
It's like going from just kicking a football around for fun with your mates after work to suddenly joining like an academy of one of the main football clubs, of Man United or something. No one throw anything at the screen right now if you're not a Man U fan. I'm not sharing anything. I don't support any team. Just an example. That's the first one I thought of. And suddenly you've now joined the elite club. And there's going to naturally be some pressure that comes in there. And I think the one thing that kind of cuts away the people that can really thrive in that environment, which is kind of what you're asking here, it's not the fact that they don't feel pressure. Yes, they do. Now, I work with managing partners of law firms, some of the top consultancies. They feel the pressure. Don't get me wrong. There is imposter syndrome, there is pressure, there's all kind of things going on because the scale and magnitude of what they're responsible for and the level of expectation of them is very high because now you are the elite of the elite. But it's not so much about whether the pressure's there or not, or trying to get rid of the pressure. It's about how can you easily regulate your emotional competence so that that is not dragging you down for too long. So in other words, feel the pressure, but bounce back quickly. And it is that ability to bounce back quickly, let go of that pressure and be able to bounce back, that really cuts away those high performers that just you look at them, you're like, God, how can you do all that? How can you achieve all those things? They're not smarter. They don't know anything drastically different to anybody else. They just have the ability to bounce back quicker of the psychology in their own mind that might start to tell them that they feel stressed or they shouldn't do this and all those doubts that start to kick in.
Yeah, and that's the definition of resilience, if you think about it, right? And I think the leaders that are able to get to a certain point are there because they are tuned in. They know what they're feeling, they're acknowledging that, they're moving on. So I think there is a entire layer of emotional intelligence as well, if we think about it. And hence, I think this, right? And I think that's why there's this whole um, group of people that say that you have to have EQ over IQ, right? In that sense, extremely important because that's what's going to help you to get from point A to point B and all the way to where you need to be, right? So absolutely. And talking about resilience, is there a resilience strategy that you have practiced, which sounded simple? Oh yeah, this is so easy to do. Or maybe, your clients have spoken about that, but it's actually really difficult to achieve or to practice.
Absolutely. I got this from one of my speaking mentors many years ago, and I wanted to speak more. I wanted to become a better speaker. I wanted to be on bigger stages, all these things. And you just, swap out speaking for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve right now. I want more visibility. I want a higher paid role. I want more responsibility, whatever it is. And he said to me this, he said, if you want to be a better speaker, then you need to be speaking more. So in other words, the thing that we want, we need to put ourselves in situations where we're able to do more of that thing. But here's the double-edged sword of human behavior is that if it feels uncomfortable just thinking about being in that situation, we are going to be very resistant and very reluctant to actually put ourselves in those situations to be able to gain more comfort, more stability, more experience with the very thing that we want to become and do more of. So that's one of those things that it sounds simple. It's like, oh yeah, well, if I want to be more visible in the organization, then I'll just put myself in situations where I become more visible to senior stakeholders. But guess what? There's going to be a little voice in your head that's going to go, well, who are you? What are they going to think about you? You don't know anything. You're not a manager. You're not this job title or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There'll be something there that pay attention to those voices because that's the very thing that you've got to push through to actually activate the very thing that you want. Because on the other side of that self-doubt, on the other side of that self-talk is the achievement that you actually want to be going for.
Yeah, and that inner dialogue where we started our conversation today is what really kicks in, right? And I think that's the part where you need to work on a little bit and say that it's as simple as this, right? You may have a self-limiting belief that will tell you, I'm not good at making presentation. A self-enabling belief could then be, I am good at making presentations. Sounds simple, very difficult to implement, right? But I think it all starts with that inner dialogue, with the belief system that you build for yourself.
Yeah. We want to take action in accordance with how we see ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have to change how we see ourselves if we are going to evolve past who we are today. And that is challenging. That's why people need coaches and mentors and people that have been through that journey. Because it almost part of it is not just the guidance, but also go, well, if they can do it, then maybe I can too. And just a
Yeah.
little bit of a shift there of what's possible in belief, self-belief.
Absolutely. And to your point, when you were talking about purpose, yeah, you mentioned that it's important that we don't look at this one big giant staring into our eyes, but rather into smaller parts. So, in taking your example, right, if you're thinking about becoming a speaker, you don't want to be a speaker who is speaking in front of 10,000 people in the first gig. You're not going to get there. It's not that easy.
Yeah, we wouldn't be ready for it. It would be the highly likely it would be a complete train smash because you're just not ready for it.
There you go. Yeah. And so breaking it down, starting with small digestible bites, and then going for that bigger goal. I think that's the way to go. Thank you for sharing that.
We can be a bit impatient, can't we? There's a side of us that gets impatient. It's like, I just want this. I just want to get there. It's like, well, slow down a little bit, right? Have that. It's amazing that you have that aspiration. It's wonderful that you have that ambition.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of a journey to unfold for you to grow, to mature, so that you're ready for that.
Yeah.
But that's exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if there is, one advice, or let's think about it in terms of investments, what are the best investments that someone can make in their future resilience, to build the resilience both personally and professionally? What do you think that is?
I think there's two things that have personally really changed things for me. And if for anyone that's actually wanting to play that bigger game, these two things are super important. Otherwise, it's just never going to happen. And no surprises that they're mindset focused. So one of them we touched on earlier. We touched on the regulation of emotions.
Yeah.
How many times have we wanted to do something and maybe we're a bit excited about it, and then the next day we wake up and now we've got a nagging self-doubt about it and it doesn't happen. I'm gonna tell my boss I want a pay rise. Yep, I've done this, I've done that, I've got everything ready. Like tomorrow morning, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna tell them. And then tomorrow morning comes, and oh, maybe I'll just wait. Oh, maybe this week's too busy. Maybe I'm going to catch them at the wrong time, and then we start to talk ourselves out of it. So what's stopping that? There's some kind of emotional change that has happened to now affect your better judgment. So that ability to know what to listen to, what not to listen to, and be able to just to regulate those disruptive emotions that don't help us move forward in our authentic selves. That's a real game changer for me to really be able to be grounded and listen to what it is that I knew was the right thing to be doing. Not always easy, but it was the right choice to be making for myself. So that's number one. I would definitely say to invest in to manage and regulate your own emotions. And the second one kind of comes into this identity piece that I was talking about earlier. Now, I was saying earlier that if we ever want to play a bigger game, then we have to be a bigger version of ourselves. So we actually have to become a slightly different person. Now, you're still the same person underneath it all, but we are growing, expanding, evolving, that you're actually like a 2.0 version of yourself. And for us to be able to do that, yes, there's all the self-belief and all of that stuff, but something very specific that I actually don't hear people talking about it too much, but I saw it it's very prevalent in the work that I'm doing, which is the ability to be able to not feel overly attached to things. Now, in this instance, when we're talking about careers, not feel overly attached to the job and the title that you do. And the example here that comes to mind, I used to work with a lawyer. And of course, you study for years when you're a lawyer. It's very much part of your personality. It's like a doctor. You've been doing it for years. That's what you studied to be. And your parents have shoved you down that path. And it's been drilled into your mind. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. In this case, it was that. But he also had artistic flair. But these two worlds felt like completely different paths. He just could not see himself in any other way than being a lawyer, his professional training, what he's invested money and time and energy into doing. And we had to really just detach from him being any particular one thing. Just rip off that label of being a lawyer and maybe try on a few other labels. And it is the ability to be able to strip away and wear different hats and different labels that actually enables you to not be overly focused on one fixed identity. And that's the second thing that I think is really important for people that really want to play a bigger game to work on in themselves, not be overly attached to the title, the job title in particular that they have.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
do, not like you are, right?
Yeah, totally. And it is so important that you maintain a sense of detachment in everything that you do. I think the other thought that got planted in my head, and I'd heard it somewhere, is that you become more of an and rather than an or. You don't have to be one over the other. You can be more than that one identity that you've decided to box yourself into. Right?
Yes.
So sometimes when I introduce myself, I'm more like, yeah, I'm Truthi. I'm a working professional and I'm a mother. I'm a daughter-in-law. I play that role. I'm a spouse and I'm, a daughter and all of that. So, and if we are able to say this for our whole lives, personal and professional, what's stopping us from saying that professionally as well, that I'm a lawyer and I'm an artist? And what a brilliant combination that is.
Yeah, exactly. And he is a brilliant artist.
Yeah.
Set up his own online shop and is selling his wares.
There you go.
Which is great. And it's just that one of the things I think really challenges people to really pivot and start to change things in their career in particular is the fear, isn't it? There's a fear of what if it doesn't work out? It's the fear of failure, and also the fear of judgment for other people. They know you as one thing, and now all of a sudden you're going to be this other thing. Well, what are they going to think about it? And I think when you're able to just detach a little bit from being any one thing, any one identity, any one label, because it's the job that you do, not who you are, it actually, your relationship with failure actually really drastically changes. It becomes more of a, not about succeeding and failing as in like this sort of black and white kind of contrast, but actually more about I'm exploring, I'm experimenting. It's very different language. It has a very different feel. And just think about how much more encouraging it would be for people to maybe start to dip their toe in a different pond, to take their career in a slightly different direction, if they felt that it was more about just testing the water, experimenting, exploring, rather than, well, if this doesn't work, I failed. Very different.
Absolutely. And Anji, it's been great speaking to you. I mean, right from, pivoting to talking about your purpose to stress, burnout, right? So we talked about that. And love the points that you made around emotional regulation. So having that kind of agility and, serving yourself a story that works for you rather than deters you from moving forward. I think it's been a masterclass in resilience in itself. So
Bless you.
Thank you, Anji. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to have you again on the podcast sometime soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Druti.
Another wonderful conversation. It was such a pleasure to connect with Anji. And let's invite our producer, Ramana. Hey, Ramana.
Hi, Dhruti. Hi, listeners.
Hey, so what did you think about the conversation today?
So, Dhruti, you had me hooked when you were introducing Anji before she came on, where you called out her mission. I love how well it was crafted as well, where you said that, her mission is clear to future-proof careers by aligning your zone of genius with meaningful purpose-led work. That really reeled me in, and I was hooked out of the conversation. I think Anji really reminds us that resilience begins with embracing a continuous evolution in a world which is constantly being shaped by AI and constant disruption.
Yeah.
Helping us stay future ready, right? Staying future ready is actually non-negotiable today.
It is. And we are all in the middle of it, right? Hate to put it this way, but people in the 40s are, and I think we had this discussion during our L&D Open as well, where somebody was highlighting that people in the 40s, watch out, because the change is massive. You have a long career yet in front of you. And if you don't stay agile and continue evolving, you're going to perish. And that is so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't want to make it like a doomsday thing. There was a beautiful thing that she said around the princess and the pea syndrome. You've heard of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was very interesting because we all know the Princess of the Pea story, right? We grew up on it. I would have never thought of using that as an analogy when
Yeah.
she describes the niggling, the feeling that you have that, okay, something like a thorn in your back, like, but you don't know what it is really. That was really interesting, Dhruti.
Yeah, and it's really about recognizing and dealing with the core issue, right? Which is the P, when it becomes a tipping point. I mean, before you get to that stage, I think all of us need to acknowledge that niggling, that feeling, that unsettled feeling that we have, that something is amiss. And rather than ignoring, if we start paying attention to that, you can really build your resilience in that sense. And because when you think about it from a point of pivoting, right? And what is really important is and this came through in the conversation as well, is that everybody, each one of us, whether we like to believe it or not, we have a unique potential. We have a unique mission, our own genius, our authentic inner voice. And that becomes central to navigating such pivots. And I think that's the embrace that we should all have in terms of how are we looking at ourselves and what truly resonates with us. And needless to say, resilience is really strengthened when we learn to detach from fixed identities, rigid job titles, my job defines me. I cannot even imagine saying that anymore. And you just become who you need to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then that really opens up the space for growth without the weight of fear or judgment of any of that.
You said it, Dhruti.
Yeah. So I've known Anji since quite some time. When we were in Singapore is when we connected first, fell out of touch, but I am so glad that I reconnected. And this is to all the listeners out there. If you have come across someone who can add value, just reach out. You never know, magic can happen. And, you can have an amazing conversation like we did for this podcast. And until I see you again, take care. This is Dhruti Shah signing off with that little note of encouragement. Bye-bye.